You can start.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today on the impact of psychology on good customer service. And today we're going to be speaking about how your organization manages employees and their mental health in the contact center environment. Customer service agents are at the forefront of all interactions. They often deal with challenging situations that come with managing a very, very high pressurized work environment. In today's discussion, we will be unpacking and outlining how mental health affects the interactions of customer service and how important it is for organizations to ensure support is available for employees exposed to customers. Our panelists today, I'm super excited about it, will also unpack the negative client experiences and how the effects of mental health of employees in the contact center or call center environments, and they'll be unpacking that topic. I'm going to ask you to please stay right through to the end if you can, as Charmaine will be unpacking and talking about how technology has helped in this area and why technology plays such an important role
just give me
if
a
it's
second.
done correctly. Okay, so I just want to introduce our speakers to you today. We have Charmaine Sheen. She's the Director of Reality Wellness and also the founder of the Reality Wellness Group, a dynamic company originally set out to help companies and employees tackle the rising HIV and AIDS crisis. This is her first step in doing good. With almost 20 years of being in the wellness industry, Charmaine has been a pivoting mechanism to addressing the mental and physical health issues in our country. Charmaine has entrenched values in loyalty, accountability, and integrity, and has worked with companies for almost 2 decades, where she has pioneered each of these companies on her own roadmap to wellness. During the COVID pandemic that literally changed our lives, Charmaine has been extensively involved with providing guidance, policy support, and insight to companies on how best to steer their way through the normal. Then we will have Nicolette Visser, who will be speaking first. She's an industrial organizational psychologist. She's also the Chief Wellness Coordinator at the Reality Wellness Group. So Nicolette, also commonly known as Nikki, Visser obtained a Master of Arts in Organizational Psychology in 2017 from the University of the Witwatersrand. She then registered with the HPCSA following and passing her board exam. Nicolette specializes in psychometrics, talent management, workplace guidance, and training. Nicolette has trained psychologists and a multitude of businesses in psychometric assessments and employee wellness. Her passion for employee wellness and mental health has led her to the employment at Reality Wellness Group, where she focuses on wellness, interventions, psychoeducation, and psychosocial support. So at the end of this, we're also going to be doing a survey, and I'd love you to all partake in that survey so we know how best to address our next webinars and things you want to hear about. I will speak about that at the end again, and we'll be doing some polls while we're talking. But without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Nicolette Visser, our first panelist.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? I assume they can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction, Janet. I really appreciate it. And as as per agreed, happy birthday. I saw someone already put it in the chat. So I'd hope everyone can also just wish Janet a very happy birthday. Today's her 50th, so it's a big one. And it's going to be super exciting. So, yeah, well done. It's exciting. So, yeah, so happy birthday. I hope you have a wonderful day. And at least it's a nice way to sort of kickstart your birthday. Yeah, I see a lot of love coming through. I can already see all the little emojis. Okay, fantastic, guys. So I really like good engagement. So please feel free to use the chat at all times. So whenever you have something that you're like, wow, this is amazing, or oh, I didn't know that, or if you have any comments, anything you'd like to add, I'd really love for you guys to make use of the chat. So please just keep it somewhere in the vicinity so you can answer. We're also going to have a lot of polls coming through. So those polls will be just asking your sort of points of view of, some of the topics that we're going to be raising. So to get kickstart, what we want to talk about today is we want to talk about what is the impact of psychology in customer service. Now we know customer service is rough, okay? Genuinely rough, and we know that there's no better way to say that. And as South Africans say, it's rough out here, and that's exactly it. When it comes to looking at customer service, you deal with a lot of difficulties within that space, because what you're dealing with is a very high pace, high pressure environment. There's a lot of stress that's coming through. You have to make sure that you're performing at your most optimal, because you're not just dealing internally, you're dealing with your clients, you're dealing with your customers. And at the end of the day, customers don't always see the other side. They don't always see what's actually happening behind you, or behind the scenes of what's happening in the business place. And so often they're expecting 100% performance, 100% coming out of whatever you're having to give them, depending on obviously what type of customer services you're dealing with. And that's really difficult, because being customer facing is very difficult as a job as a whole, because sometimes people are nasty, people are difficult, and you don't always enjoy having a conversation. And also, when you add the technology element, sometimes people just forget that you're a human being on the other side of that phone call. And so they become very verbally abusive and difficult. On top of that, you have, for example, bosses and managers who are coming down and you saying, okay, this needs to be perfect. And that can be really difficult. And that's why you'll see that when it comes to customer service, you'll often find there's, for example, a high turnover. You'll find that they often suffer with a lot of health issues as well as mental health issues. Now, what's interesting to understand is that in customer service, there have actually been studies done. Actually, a lot of studies done on customer service to see what are some of the things and the challenges that customer service personnel are actually struggling with. And what they actually found, the main one was anxiety. They're really struggling with anxiety, and not considering the fact that anxiety as a whole is one of the most common disorders in the world. It's also the fact that you have the added element of that high pressure, and also the fact that you have these verbally abusive customers that you're dealing with. With that said, that also is an element of high stress. And what that leads to is ill health. And the reason why that is a lot of people don't know, but your mental health and your physical health are directly linked. What's happening in your body is happening in the mind. Whatever's happening in the mind is happening in the body. Now, if I had to use an example, how many people actually know that those white sores you get in your mouth are actually usually a sign of stress? Could be something else, but generally it's stress. That usually means that your immune system's dropped, because you're feeling highly stressed, your cortisol levels are really high. There's all these hormones that are basically being thrown right out of balance. And what's happening is your immune system drops, and then what happens is it starts to get these little viruses that start to say, hey, there's no immune system stopping me. And then they start to come through. And that's an interesting one, because we often talk about physical health, but we never ever talk about our mental health. And we never really think about what kind of impact is that having on my work, what kind of impact is that having on my body, what kind of impact is that having on my relationships with the people around me. And so those are really important things that we really want to unpack today. With that said, there's a lot of trauma that comes with it too. And I know that for some of us, it might feel a bit extreme to call it trauma, but the fact of the matter is dealing with irate customers all of the time can be really difficult emotionally. And sometimes, especially if you are doing it within a more, toxic sort of environment, that can actually lead to a lot of traumatic stress. And that can be very difficult. And we don't want to have the conversation that sometimes the environment we're in can cause that level of trauma. With that said, burnout is a major issue, depression, as well as also low self esteem as a result. And so it can be really difficult to sort of navigate that space. And what's interesting is that that is sort of the requirement of the job. You need to sort of recognize that there are certain things we can't change, but how we respond to those things is what's important. I often use the analogy of the fact that you cannot change certain situations, but you can change your response to it. So, how you deal with that stress, how you deal with that burnout, how you deal with, that self esteem is really important in trying to say, well, how do I turn this moment or turn this event and actually turn it on its head and take this into a point where I can become successful, where I can learn from this moment. And that's what's really important is a lot of the time we use the excuse, I don't have time to go exercise or gym or meditate or whatever, do stuff for my mental health. But it's important because you will suffer if you do not actually deal with your mental health correctly in a manner that you should. At the end of the day, what you're doing is every day you're pouring out of your cup, pouring, 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 giving back to your customers, giving back to your family, back to the people around you. But what you're not doing is putting back into that cup. And so you keep trying to pour, and eventually one day you're going to pour from an empty cup, and you can give nothing more to your customers. You can give nothing more to your family. You can give nothing more to the people around you. And so it's so important to be able to actually come to terms with that, and not only come to terms with that, say, what am I going to do with that and how am I going to manage it? And that's exactly what we're going to be doing here today. Now, before we go into anything, we're going to release a poll now to talk about, have you actually experienced some of these before in the past? Maybe if you've been in customer service before, is it something that you're currently in at the moment? So please, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Also, if you would like to elaborate a little bit more on your experience, please use the chat to also elaborate on that. So you'll see a poll should come up. There should be a big little thing that just pops. If you're not seeing it, just be mindful that on your screen there should be like almost like a thing that says polls. It looks like little bars. So if it's not on your screen, then just click on that.
Nikki, it is up.
Perfect. Yeah, I see it there. Okay, so I see something already has come in the chat, so I just want to talk through it a little bit. Is customers want to deal with humans, so they call to the care lines, but want a robotic yes response, and then struggle with that human no response. That's actually quite an interesting one. It's because sometimes you have a job to kind of say, I cannot do this, but there is sort of this almost expectation from clients that you'll do anything and everything, you'll jump through hoops for them, which granted you will, but there's also limitations in what you can do. And sometimes that can be quite frustrating. I see that the poll has come through. So we have about 67% of people who said, yes, I have struggled with at least one of these wellness issues that have been mentioned on screen. About 24% said no, and then the rest are not in customer service at the moment. That's perfect. So this is really good to see, because what we need to be able to do is recognize what is going on and what we're actually struggling with at this moment in time. Now, with that said, before we get into the conversation around customer service and what to do in that space, let's first go back to the basics. What is mental health first? And how does the psychology of mental health, so how does that actually then impact you as a customer service agent of some form? Okay, so mental health in its very basic form is basically your emotional, your psychological, and your social well being. Now, with that said, it affects everything. Literally everything in your life is affected by your mental health. How you talk to people, how you interact with them, how you manage stress, the choices you make in your life. And a good example of that is the fact that people with mental health issues generally have a higher likelihood of having encounters with the law and financial issues. And the reason for that is because we make poor choices when we're not in the right state of mind. With that said, that can lead to other issues. For example, with the way that you're thinking, the way that you're feeling, and your behaviors. So think about, for example, when you're not in a good space or you're in a bad mood or someone's just getting on your nerves, what you tend to do is you'll withdraw or you'll get very aggressive with them. You'll notice that that sometimes can come through even at work. So when you get into work, you'll think, oh, I had an argument with my partner. Um, Now I'm really irritated. And then you displace that onto someone at work, and then you start shouting at someone at work. And maybe even just the way you talk to your customer. So you're talking to a customer, maybe very abrupt, very rude, and even the customer says, "Are you okay? Like, why are you speaking to me like that?" So it's really something to really think about, but it affects everything that we do. And so it's interesting to me that we don't talk more about it. With that said, when we talk about mental health, we don't realize how common it is in terms of it being an illness. So, in the world, 1 in 7 people, so that's 792 million people, struggle with mental health. That's a big number. So, it equates to 1 in 7. And what's interesting is they've underestimated that number, meaning that there are so many more people with it, but they don't talk about it. And the reason why they don't talk about it is because there's a taboo around talking about mental health. It's much easier for me to have flu and go to a doctor and say to someone at work, "Oh, I went to the doctor today." But to tell someone, "Oh, I went to my therapist," you're going to feel a little bit embarrassed, and it's hard to say it. And that's why I think we need to start normalizing that conversation and say, you know what, it's just as normal. If I'm feeling physically unwell, I go to a doctor. When I'm feeling mentally unwell, I need to go see a therapist. And there's nothing wrong with that conversation. It's about then saying, I'm taking control of my body, I'm taking control of my mind. With that said, when we look at the statistics specifically in South Africa, 1 in 6 South Africans will struggle with either anxiety, depression, or substance abuse. Those are your top three in South Africa. And that's crazy because that means 6 people in a room, you have one person who's probably going to be struggling with one of those. More often than not, they're usually interlinked because they are sort of comorbidities. So you can be someone who has depression and anxiety, and often that leads to substance abuse issues. So it's quite an interesting and really diabolical, if I can say, cycle where you just kind of land up in this really terrible mental state. So it's really sad that we don't talk about this more. With that said, only 27% of South Africans, so despite the numbers of people who actually struggle with mental health, only 27% of those with severe mental health disorders will actually receive treatment. That's a very little number. And there's a number of reasons for it. There's a lack of accessibility. There's also the taboo around it. I mean, think about in your own community, if someone talks about therapy, there's often this rhetoric in South Africa that, you know, mental health issues and therapy is only for certain races or certain cultures and certain genders. But the reality is, everyone can be affected by it because it's not just this abstract idea, it's the chemicals in your brain that are not necessarily shooting off the way they're supposed to. And we don't realize that it's the physiology of how our bodies are functioning that's actually leading to these mental health issues. Now, I want us to take a moment to think about mental health. So that includes stress, anxiety, maybe low moods, all of those sorts of things. And I want you to ask yourself the question, how do I think mental health can impact my work? So I'd love to hear from your guys' side, like what do you think is happening there? So how do you think it would impact you at work? I'd love to see it in the chat. I'll wait and see if any answers come through. Okay, I see someone said loss of focus. Absolutely, that's a definite one. And think about, what does loss of focus actually mean within your workplace, especially in customer service? Productivity. So I'm assuming you're saying it decreases your productivity, low concentration, lack of productivity, no motivation. Absolutely. Those are a lot of things that in frustration. That's a nice one. Impact the desire to do better. Yeah, that's actually quite an interesting one where you don't feel you can actually move forward. Mental fatigue, it affects your output. You become difficult to work with. Confidence and also team participation, inability to make decisions, can mean the difference between excellence and disaster. That's actually quite an interesting contrast there, because that's very
True.
true. And then also willingness to work, conflict with colleagues. Yeah, that's a lot, guys. And if you think about it, loss of creativity, that's also very important. Um, And if you start to see all of these things starting to come up, it bubbles up. Mental health is an interesting one because you ignore, you ignore, you ignore, you ignore, and then one day you pop. And then that's when it comes out. And when that happens, it actually feels like you're going through so much. It feels like, the whole world is tumbling around you if you think about it. So I often use the analogy of it's like a container. Your mind is a container. It can only take so much. If you keep filling it, filling it, filling it, and not releasing all of those frustrations, that anger, that is those emotions, then you're not actually, then you're not actually doing anything with that. You keep filling that container, and what happens is it spills out in little ways, and even maybe the container might even break. Maybe it's too heavy, and what happens is now you're in a situation where you land up being hospitalized. You might land up maybe getting into severe arguments. You're going through breakups and all these funny things that could have been avoided had we just managed it from the very beginning. So another poll has come through. Um, Let us know. Have you noticed that your mental health has been impacting your work in the last month? Is it something that you're actually quite aware of that's happening at this moment in time? I do see while you guys are filling out the poll, I'm just going to quickly go through any of the others I missed. So, irritability, a general disinterest in partaking in social activities. Yeah. Mental state affects the effectiveness of the work we do, and that snowballs into every other area in our lives. Very true. Working in operations needs your mental state very clear and on point, else you will miss important stuff and create more anxiety and unnecessary stress. Very, very, very true. Very true. Hey, you guys are good. Hey, I feel like you guys can just do the talk for me. So with the mental state, you can see so quite a few people actually say so more than half of us have experienced this in the last month, have felt that our mental health is affecting the way that we're working at the moment. And that's something that's really important to address. That if I recognize that's happening, I need to be able to manage that very carefully. Now, as you guys said, what happens? It's errors. You also have issues with absenteeism because you're not only just not present, you're not always there. You don't come to work. You phone in, you say, I'm feeling sick. You're not feeling sick, you're just not feeling mentally well. But you kind of know that, okay, if I just say I'm sick, then, no one really will question that. Presenteeism is I'm there, but I'm making a lot of mistakes. I'm not actually mentally present. So I don't know what I'm doing. In certain industries, that could lead to a fatality. And so it's really important to be mindful that these are very dangerous things. Lack of performance, productivity, we're less engaged. What happens is then there's a high turnover in business because now people are leaving because they're stressed. And your experience that you give to your clients and your customers is very poor because you're not talking to them carefully. You're making a lot of mistakes with their orders or making a lot of mistakes with what they're requesting from you. And what happens is they get a poor experience, and you know that that's not a reflection of you on a good day or a normal day. But now that's how they sort of view everyone. And as we know, people are more likely to complain than they are to compliment. And that's a frustrating thing as well, is that you've done fantastic 90% of the time, but when your mental health becomes worsened, that experience then goes to your clients, and your clients sit and complain. And that also exacerbates a lot of that stress. Also, you start treating others poorly, you start treating yourself poorly, you start to displace onto other people, you become pessimistic and very irritable. So these are things that we need to be extra conscious of when we're at work. With that said, now that we're on the topic of knowing that my mental health is struggling, that I'm struggling with my mental health, do you know your signs? So another poll is going to come up. So do I know my signs for mental health? Now, while the poll is up, I'm going to use an analogy I often use in all my talks. When you have a car, on the car there's a dashboard, and on the dashboard there's lights. The purpose of those lights is to tell you something is wrong. Okay. When something is wrong, you need to address it, right? You're not going to, well, some of us ignore it, but you shouldn't. But if you ignore it, and it's going to cause a problem for the car. So, for example, if it's check engine light, okay, something's happening. I better take this to a mechanic. My petrol gauge is down. It's telling me I'm in reserve. Otherwise, I better get to the petrol station, or I'm going to be pushing this car. So your car tells you something's wrong, but your body doesn't. If when you wake up in the morning, it's not like you get all these flashing lights telling you something's wrong with my body. or something's wrong with my mind. And so it's a lot easier, it's a lot harder to understand what are my signs and how do I know something's wrong. What's also interesting is that we're taught to know physical signs when it comes to physical ill health. So I know when I've got cold, I know when I've got a flu, I know when I've got cough, I know when I've got bronchitis, I know all of these things, but do I know when I'm mentally unwell? Or is that something that I had to just sort of navigate and learn by myself? And so I don't always know all of those signs. And sometimes we just live that way, thinking that is normal way to live. And that's dangerous because we're not equipped enough to know our signs. Um, and I see that we've already got the poll up. So 55% said yes, I know my signs. 19% said no, I don't know my signs, and also possibly, but I ignore them. So 26%. And if you think about that, that's almost half of people who are probably not addressing their mental health in that moment in time for a number of different reasons. And it's really important to actually say, why am I ignoring that? And how do I actually start to address it? Now, there are three ways to address issues, but your first and most important step in addressing mental health issues is becoming aware. Am I aware something is wrong with my body? Am I aware something's wrong with my mind? And how do I become aware is important. So, knowing your signs and knowing your symptoms is actually one of the most pivotal first steps in knowing that I need help. How do I know I need a hug today? How do I know I need to see a therapist tomorrow? How do I know that I need to go for a walk to deal with my stress before I go and bleh, onto other people? So it's just something to really think about, that the first step is knowing what is my body telling me? Because as
Mm,
much as we think mental health is an abstract idea, our bodies are telling us something is wrong. We just choose to ignore that more often than not. So, for example, physical signs is usually exhaustion. You can be physically exhausted. Doesn't matter how much Barocca you have. It doesn't matter how much what food you eat. Doesn't matter how much caffeine you take. You are exhausted, physically, mentally exhausted.
mm,
You lack that energy. You find that you're getting frequently ill. Maybe you're sleeping too much, or maybe even sleeping too little compared to before. You might be someone who experiences a lot of headaches and muscle aches, and maybe a tension in your legs. Also appetite. Sometimes you're eating more, eating less, and that obviously leads to weight gain or weight loss. And even just changes in things like your heart rate and your breathing. So you notice that I'm very short on breath and I don't actually know why. I feel like I'm dying. The same happens with your breathing as well. In terms of emotional signs, you'll start to notice that your mood is shifting. One minute you're feeling okay, next minute you're not feeling okay anymore. Sometimes you feel helpless or trapped, and that leads you to being sort of pessimistic. You start saying, "Well, my whole life is terrible, and everything's stressful, and life's hard," and that's one of those things. And so you become detached, alone,
mm,
withdrawn from people. You're disengaged from them, and also you're just generally dissatisfied with everything you have. And then that also leads to changes in your behaviors too. I don't
mm,
want to talk to people. So think about the times when you're in a bad mood. You don't respond to people on WhatsApp. It might even take you a month or two to respond to them. Not even just WhatsApp. Maybe people are phoning you, just ignoring their calls, ignore. You don't want to go out for coffee with them anymore. You procrastinate. You're not getting your work done. You're coming late. You might be eating a lot. You might be dealing with a lot of more drugs or alcohol use. And also, you just don't care. So you don't even come to work as much as anymore. So it's quite interesting to see your body's telling you, your behavior is telling you, but sometimes we ignore it. And like I said, you ignore your petrol gauge, what happens? You're pushing the car. And
mm,
sometimes you can't even push your car. So, what are you going to do? What is your lifeline? How are you going to get out of
mm,
that situation? So, rather nip it in the bud. So, the next question then is, what do you do for your mental health? So, once you've recognized something is wrong, I now need to recognize that I have control of what I do with that. So I need to figure out, what am I going to do? What do I need? And so the first thing is, how am I feeling? And then what do I need? I'm feeling terrible. I need a hug. I'm feeling terrible. I need to go to the gym. So what do you do? So I'd love to see what you guys do actually for your mental health for those who do feel that you have that a little bit under control. Okay, I'll just wait for it. I see a few people did put stuff in the chat though. Hypnosis. Yeah, hypnosis is definitely an option. A workout to help manage my mental health. Gym. Okay, need a holiday. Holidays usually help, but sometimes you feel like you need a holiday for your holiday because you're busy packing and unpacking all the time. Workout, daydreaming, breathing, garden work, exercise, healthy eating, reading, journaling, mental fitness exercises, step back, spend time away from everything. Okay, I work from home, so leave my office, get some fresh air. So just changing the space, meditation and prayer, a drink, go for long walks, prayer, gospel music helps. Okay, currently nothing, but do take your meds, yeah. So medication is also a really good and viable option. Socialize with friends and family, meditation, also worship. We got sleep, watch comedy films, listen to music. Okay, cut off obligations. So I'd call that setting boundaries. Yeah, I do my gardening. Yeah, lovely guys. These are really nice ideas. And you know what's interesting is that everyone thinks that mental health is this long and big, thing where you have to say, okay, I need to, for example, go and meditate for 2, 3 hours every day. That's not necessarily true. Mental health is doing little things every day that helps, whether it's a 5-minute walk a day, whether it's, which isn't much, 5-minute walks a day, that's 30 minutes in a week or so, or if you obviously if you skip a couple days, um, you're asking what for 30 minutes a week, which is about 4 hours, well, actually 2 hours, 2 hours a month of your time. Even things like going to therapy once a month, that's only asking for an hour out of your time. Mental health doesn't have to necessarily take up a big chunk of your time. Self care doesn't have to take up a big chunk of your time. Those are things that can be done very quick, very easy, and they can be managed very simply. In little everyday things that you do. Like you said, garden work is beautiful. You can just do that. Going to a quick gym session, even a 30-minute boxing session, that is more than sufficient. Even if you do that once a week. And that's not asking for much if you think about it. We're asking you for 2 to 4 hours a month of your time, a month. So little things make a difference, and it's about building up the right habits. And so, what can you do as an individual within customer service that really helps with your mental health? Well, first and foremost, understanding your signs is the most important step. Like I said, you cannot deal with your mental health if you don't know something's wrong. I can't check. I don't know. So if I'm not getting those dashboard signs, I don't know what's going on. So you need to do a daily check in with yourself. You wake up in the morning, 2 minutes of your time. How am I feeling today? Simple as that. How am I feeling? And what do I need? From there, then you say, okay, well, if I know I'm stressed or I'm anxious, then I know there's certain things I need to do to deal with that anxiety or that stress. Maybe I need to go and decompress. So book some time with yourself. And I say book, not make time, book. And I'm serious. Go to your diary and book time with yourself and use that time for decompression. That's just to go have quiet time for 5 minutes outside or take a breath or that could be, I don't know, just watching a 30-minute or 20-minute comedy show. It's something so simple as that. And if you can unplug, completely unplug, even if it's just for like an hour, unplug so that you can use that time for family or use that time for you, because you don't realize that technology, social media, dangerous. It's a very dangerous thing for your mental health. So actually taking time away from it is really important. With that said, try to build up habits on certain activities that will help you with your mental health, whether that's in the form of exercise, meditation, whether it's prayer, whether it's boxing, whatever it is, habit building is important. And what's interesting is we think that, okay, let me start gymming. Gymming is hard. It's like, I hate going to the gym. I'm not even going to lie. I hate it. But if I want to go to gym, I need to build a habit for that. So if you look at the book Atomic Habits, they talk about how to effectively habit build. And what I do is let me start off simple. I come home and I just change into my gym clothes. That's it. I'm not going to the gym. I'm just changing. Make a habit of just changing so that by the time you do it after, let's say, 2 3 weeks, it becomes automatic. I automatically change into my gym clothes. Then from there I move on to saying, okay, let me get in my car and drive to the gym. Little things like that, and you keep doing that, and you build it up, build it up, build it up, until one day it becomes so like common sense for you. Like, for example, when you learn to drive, you thinking about when you first learned, you're like, okay, put the clutch in, when we move the gear, what is going on? You're getting confused. But once you get used to it, you drive, you don't even know how you got home sometimes because it just sits subconsciously. So that's habit building, is taking it slow, building it up. And once you get there, then you keep that as a almost a mandatory thing. Even get people to hold you accountable. So have a gym buddy, or a boxing buddy or a personal trainer, for example. If that's not an option, have like a friend to be like, if you don't go to gym or if you don't do meditation every Saturday, you got to pay me $50. It's something stupid, but it's just about being held accountable. And then also, don't forget to take breaks during your working hours. Sometimes I know that's hard and I know that's really difficult in the space you're in, but whenever you get that 15-minute chance to go have a cup of coffee or go for a bathroom break, quickly go for a walk around the office, even if it's just to take a quick breath, and to just sort of recollect yourself. Do exactly that. Okay, that's all you need. Sometimes that 5 minutes to get out of the environment makes a big difference, and so that you come back and you feel a little bit more refreshed. And don't be scared to ask for help. That's from a colleague, from a friend, from a manager, from a someone at home. Say, I need help. There's nothing wrong with that. And especially go to professionals if that's necessary. If you need to go see a professional, sometimes they're there just to talk to. They don't. You don't even have to have a specific disorder to go to them. You can just go to them and say, I had a terrible day and I just want to rant. That's what they're actually there for. They're there to just talk it through. With that said, the next question you got to think about then is, what should businesses actually be doing? And so, what businesses should be doing is they need to start also looking at, how do I better support my employees? How do I better support my teams? And the way that they can support their teams is, first of all, training. Training is so important because learning certain skills are not common sense to every person. So, learning how to manage customers, in a certain way, but not just from a professional point of view, but also being able to start sort of not personalize some of that abuse, and try to sort of disengage from what they're trying to say, and understanding that they're not upset necessarily with you. They're just upset that things are not happening their way. And how do we sort of navigate that and deal with that? With that said, also having training on mental health is really important. So understanding that this can lead to certain mental health issues and what you should be doing in that moment in time. So, for example, what breathing exercises to do, etc. Also, businesses should be making a scene, but for good reviews also, not just bad reviews. Often, a lot of businesses will be like, "Oh, you got a complaint," and keep pointing out the complaints. But sometimes just getting a thank you from a customer should be sort of almost revered, and said like, "Oh, I got a beautiful thank you on the phone," and not just the email ones, because not everyone takes time to send an email to compliment. Some people just do it on the phone. They say, "Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate that you've done this for me." So even if it's like a little bell system that every time you get a thank you, you go ding ding. It's so nice to just sort of recognize that that thank you just makes such a big difference. Also, as a business, try to create psychologically safe spaces. So that's like a breathing room, places where people can come and talk to each other, or just take a breath. So there's a company we know that's making breathing rooms. So it's just a room they go, they breathe, then they can also call us and see if they need to talk it out. But that's really helpful and really important. And then lastly is also providing support and services that can help them. So, for example, having a wellness provider can be really helpful. Now, to sort of end off the last of this is, before I go into my interview with Charmaine, is I want to talk about some communication skills that are needed. Sometimes we want to just vent with each other, and we need to be able to know how to have that conversation. So, to have that conversation, what's really important is to understand that you need to know how to actively listen. So not necessarily trying to fix their problem, not necessarily trying to give them a solution, but saying, well, what do you need right now? And if it's just to vent, then let them vent. That's all. But listening to them, validating them, making sure they don't feel judged is really important. So just saying, I hear what you're saying. I can see why that's a frustrating thing for you. Simple as that. You're not making a judgment. You're not saying, oh, but I've done something different. You're not doing any of that. You're just saying, I can see why that's frustrating. I can see why that's upsetting. Absolutely. That makes so much sense. I understand where you're coming from. It's actually normal to feel that way. That is more than enough just to make a person feel seen and feel heard. That's all. And also giving them a private space to talk in. And remember, you don't have to fix their problem. They don't want the problem to be fixed all the time. Sometimes they just want to talk it out. So ask them, do you want to talk it out or do you want a solution? And give them that room to sort of open up. And also let them know when you can't take it. If you've gone through too much today, say, I'm not okay today. I really don't think I can take it. Okay. As a
So
final
Nikki,
point of
yeah. Oh, sorry. There was just one more poll that came up.
yes, the poll came up to say, do you know how to have the conversations? Okay, I see 50% actually said they think they know, but they'd like to improve. 35% said yes, they do know how to handle the conversation. 11% said no. And then 4% said they never thought about it. Yeah, sometimes we don't think about it. That's okay. We've never dealt with it sometimes. Now, as a final point, I also want to talk about the fact that technology makes a huge difference too. So when it comes to technology, we need to understand that technology has a good role and has a bad role. On the worst side of it, it makes things impersonal. And that's why sometimes customers feel very brave to say the things that they say on the phone. Also, it's very distracting. I mean, if you think about um, let's say meetings, we're so much with virtual meetings being a new thing now, we're so much more accessible. So we just get meetings, but we don't actually have time to get the work done. So that can be the negative side of it. But on the other side of that is technology can be fantastic if you know how to use it, because technology helps you work smarter, not harder. And if that's one thing that I love technology. I love to make things easy for me. I think I'm a lazy person. So if I'm lazy, it means I need things done efficiently, so that I can get my things done quicker. And that's why having the right sort of systems in place makes a big difference, especially systems that are centered for your people. So user-centric designs, and also just taking to recognition that training needs to happen for those systems too. Being taught and trained on those things is definitely something that is helpful. So think about, how can I use my technology to work with me and not against me? That is an important thing. And that's what we're going to talk about with Charmaine very quickly. I see a poll has come up. Let's see the answers. So do you feel technology has had a negative impact or positive? Some people definitely positive, 12%, 10% said definitely negative. 57% said more good than bad. So there's been pros and cons, but more good. And then the 22% said more bad than good. So it's interesting to see the different levels of experience here, because it's also important to understand, how can I make that more efficient for us? So I'm going to talk to Charmaine very quickly about how did she actually use technology as a way to sort of build on her team, um, who for those who don't know, Reality Wellness has a call center that is for telephonic counselors who actually provide counseling online. Now, with that said, Charmaine actually runs that ship. And what she's going to do is talk about how did she actually make that sort of process a lot more effective, and how that impacted their mental health. Okay. Hi, Charmaine.
Hi, Nikki. Thanks. So I think what's important to remember is, mental health affects every organization, but we do find running a call center, we do find more challenges, but that's why we also focus on good mental health for our employees. So we have fun challenges, we teach people good coping skills. And I think a big thing is, running a professional environment. So making sure that, it is high-paced, but that there's always a reflection ability. So making sure that people are able to engage, there's an open door policy, but that mental health is priority in our business.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that. So, yeah, I think what would also be helpful is to understand, how has technology helped your team as well in terms of managing their mental health?
Absolutely. I mean, we've last year changed our internal technology system that we run. And it's made a huge difference because remember, when things are easier, people feel like they achieve more. So, for example, when you leave work and you've got a to-do list and you haven't achieved what you wanted to because of it's difficult or it's time consuming or there's so many different files you've got to work on, you sometimes leave quite frustrated and feeling like you haven't reached your goal. And we just looked at new systems last year, and it's something that we put a budget to every year because we've just seen that we have happier employees because they're reaching more personal goals. So they're setting goals, they are able to deliver more and better quality. And I think for us, technology has also played a big role in, we all have customer complaints that we have to deal with. And what's nice with technology is you always get the 3 stories, you're always able to provide a professional response, not an emotional response. And so for us, technology has helped not only the team, but also the management in making sure that we always are able to get all the facts, which I think supports good business nowadays and is important.
And also helps the employees feel supported because it's not just like you're jumping down their throat. You're really thinking about it and say, okay, let's listen to the facts first, and then we can actually have a conversation.
Very true.
And in terms of the mental health of your employees, how do you support them from that point of view?
So I think being a more structured organization, in terms of we've got to practice what we preach. So we obviously have supervision for our call center, which we find extremely beneficial. And that's compulsory. So even if you don't want to sit and chat, you are able to just be present with the supervisor. It's actually a clinical supervisor. And then we also do fun things. We find that a lot of companies don't embrace fun aspects, and that's where technology has also made it really easy because you can do so much without having to take people out of their jobs. If we look at technology nowadays, how you can reach so many more of your employees without disrupting their day. So making use of that for us is something we've seen really beneficial, especially for our night shift employees. So they're part of the team, using all these tools to our benefit, which I think a lot of companies don't always do. And that's why it's so important, like for companies like Lego, that you engage with to see what tools. And they're as creative as most companies, just because they're technology. And that's what we've seen a big impact with.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much for that. And for those who don't know what supervision is, it's not supervisor like team leader, it's supervision more like therapy to see how they can handle cases and also time to vent and let things out. So, and I think that's really important, is just having that time. So thank you so much, Charmaine. I think that's all that's time we have time for. We've got a final 10 minutes just for anyone to ask any questions, if they have any questions for you, Charmaine, or for Janet, or for myself. So please use this time to ask any questions. Also, just tell us your thoughts. And before you go, we also want you to fill in a survey just to let us know what other topics would you be interested in joining into. What more can we actually do to support you? I see your questions already come through.
Nikki, if I could just ask you, while you're answering that question, just to flip to the last slide, so that people can just take down any details if they need to take that down.
Yes, there we go. Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, so also keep in mind that, let's say, for example, tonight you're in the shower and you're like, oh my gosh, I actually forgot to ask this question. You can actually send us an email or contact us on the numbers on screen. So for technology, you can obviously contact Liga Group, and then you can see these are all of their details on screen. If it's something related to wellness or any questions related to that, you can also contact us at Reality Wellness. We're more than happy to answer any questions you might have. With that said, one of the questions, what advice would you give to businesses that want to incorporate psychology into their customer service strategy but don't know where to start? So this is something that I think Charmaine can touch on, but I'll also just touch on from my point of view. So I think the most important thing is to figure out what is the need in terms of when we say psychology. So often with wellness companies, like for example with Reality Wellness, is you can actually offer them as a starting point services for the call center. And when I say this a call center, it's because, for example, whenever you're in customer service, there's so many things happening. They don't always have time to actually go see therapists. And also, it's not always affordable for every person. So, actually giving them the opportunity to actually call in when they have the capacity and they can have virtual sessions with therapists can be really helpful. And by providing those services, that makes already a big difference. From there, then you can start to have the conversation around, can I start extending that to face? Because obviously, wellness companies do provide services for face to face, as well as also saying, well, do I need someone to come on site? Maybe we see that there's a need for a therapist to come regularly. And it's little things like that that needs to sort of be unpacked to see what is the capacity for people to see a therapist. And if that's not the possibility, what options can we give them to make it more accessible to them? So my advice would be to maybe first contact a wellness company. For example, you can contact us, and then we can have this meeting with you and say, well, how do we customize solutions with you that actually can be fit into your actual strategy around helping with mental health? I definitely think for customer service, though, an on-site therapist is needed, and telephonic or virtual is very much needed because they can actually do it when they have time. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has any anything to add to what I just said.
Janet, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm just loving all the questions that are coming through. It's really, really helpful. And I see some people have commented and said this is really helpful. Just so that you know, we'll be doing a follow-up series. We'll be doing more of these things. That's why it's so important. If you could please contribute towards the survey and let us know what else you want to hear about, so that we can put the right materials together and do one of these again, because we're going to be doing a series of these.
Perfect. I do see some people are asking for costing. If anyone is looking for costing from both sides, Kaliga or us, please just contact us on the details on screen, and then we can actually provide the information to you, and then we can assist you from that point of view.
Perfect. So we are the technology side, and then Nikki, if I can refer to you as that, Nikki and Charmaine are on the wellness side.
Okay, another question. How do you know that the person who needs help will be honest over a call? How do you overcome that? Will helping a supervisor to also support? Okay, so I'm assuming you're referring to, for example, if someone calls in to say that they need help. Well, more often than not, when you're already calling into a call center needing counseling, you're already honest with yourself that something's wrong. And it's really important that you've sort of had that conversation where you can say, well, I need to actually be open and honest with my therapist, who is a professional. They have studied, they have honors and master's degrees that allow them to actually provide you with full understanding, and actually give you proper sort of support for what you're going through. They have theories and research and science behind what they're telling you. So what's really important to understand is that when you're calling in, you already need to know that being honest is going to be your best policy, because we cannot make a psychological program for you if you're not being honest with us. So that's really important as a preemptive. But how do you know if someone's not being honest? Honestly speaking, therapists know, and I don't know how to explain it to you, but we know when you're lying. We won't say it, but we know. So that's why I'm saying that the training behind it is so important. You can tell. And that's why we're here. We're here to kind of unpack that and say, why do you feel uncomfortable to talk about it? And how can we actually navigate that conversation a little bit better? I say it as a joke, but I'm serious. It's really important to just talk it through. And we're not judging you. I swear we're not. We don't even think of it that way. So really, really important to just have that honest conversation with yourself and then have that honest conversation with us. If it's to a supervisor, though, I can understand where the hesitance comes in. So if you aren't able to speak to your supervisor, maybe say to them, look, you're going through something, I need help. But I don't feel comfortable in this environment to talk about it. Is there a possibility I can talk to someone else or see a professional for it? Which method is best to handle mental issues, drugs or non-drugs management? Depends on the issue. That's a very difficult conversation, because if it's a chronic issue, medication is needed. But it's not just medication. You need medication and behavioral therapy at the same time. A lot of people think if you do one, that's sufficient. It's not. You need to do both. With that said, it depends on what the issue actually is. If it's anxiety or depression, often medicinal use is needed. But there's different types of medicines in this day and age. So not your you don't always have to use your standard antidepressants and things like that. So there's a lot of options that are actually available. And that's why it's important to know what therapist you're going to, because different therapists use different methods and different levels of each treatment option to help you. So it's really important to understand what the issue is. I know that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but that's hard.
Okay, so we've got 3 minutes left. So I'd like to ask one last question to one of the panelists. That's to Charmaine. If you could put in sort of a minimum of, say, 2 or 3 bullets, what technology did for your business. How did that influence, change your business?
It made a happier place.
Mm-hmm.
I had happier employees because they could do what they're good at. That's to sum it up, you know. So yes, it costs money and you invest, but when you see the output and you can see the stress levels have reduced, it makes a big difference.
Fantastic. Thank you, Charmaine. So I just want to thank everybody for joining today. I hope it's been helpful. And if you could keep a lookout for our follow-up series. And again, if we could just have those inputs into the survey, that would be incredibly helpful. And thank you for also making my day today. It's been a very, very special day having you all on board. And again, thank you, Charmaine. Thank you, Nikki. Your wisdom and knowledge and time has been incredibly helpful, and we're very grateful for that.
Thanks, Janet. Have a lovely day further.